Hi everyone, in this video I want to show you how I make my small rose using my small rose template. Now I do have two other videos with this rose template or this rose template style up already in my channel. I have the medium size and the large size, but the small rose, a separate video for the small rose was requested a couple of times, and so I finally had a chance to put it up, or film and put it up. And the standard in which I make this rose style is shown in my medium rose tutorial, but because I didn't want to make the same exact video, I'm adding a little bit something different in this video to show you compared to the other ones. But everything else is somewhat the same. I'm using the same paper type. This is 65 pound or 176 grams per square meter paper weight. You can usually find that at most craft stores. I do use a bone folder, and I have a glue gun with glue sticks for this in order to assemble this flower. So I will leave some links in the description box about the materials I use, but I'll get into assembling this rose since I've talked about it twice before. So what I have here, like I do in my medium and large size rose tutorial videos, is I have 8 small bud pieces, or small petal, rose petals, but I called this the bud piece. And then I have 12 medium size petals and then 6 large. And what I do first is I start by gluing the pieces for the center together first. So with my glue gun, I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the bottom of the stem for the small bud and attach 2 pieces together. And I'm going to do that 4 times since I have 8 petals. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap them like this so that I create this cross-shaped piece. And then one more. And the way that I glue them together is just add a little bit of glue and then overlap them. So I didn't mention it, but the amount that I glue it over is about 1/2 inch. Or maybe close to, yeah, about 1/2 inch. 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. It really doesn't make a huge difference, but just enough to add a line of glue and then glue the 2 pieces together. It does not need to be exact. So now that I have these 2 cross-shaped pieces, what I like to do next is curl the sides of my petals. And so with my bone folder, I'll leave a link about this particular one in the description box. I like to use it to curl my petals. You can use any tool that you want. It does not have to be a bone folder. But I prefer using this as it's easiest for me to use. So I just want to do that with every side of the petal. And I've gotten to a point where it's really easy to curl just one edge, flip it over, and then curl the other edge. And I'll also want to curl the medium and the large size petals that I have. I usually take 2 at a time. You can take 3 or more. I just find that the petals that are sitting on top get curled a lot more than the ones on the bottom with the more that you stack together. So 2 is a nice number. You can get through it really quick. Just by adding a little bit of curl, it'll help shape the rose to make it look more realistic. If you're not using bone folder or you're using something like a rolling method, just make sure that it rolls and gives enough curl. So if you're using a glue stick or even just a bigger glue stick, or even something rod shaped, just make sure that you get enough curl. You can curl like that. I think that's a little bit too tight, so I like to curl that out a little bit more. I get a lot of emails from people asking me, people who've purchased templates from me and asking tips on how to make their rose when it doesn't look exactly like mine. And generally one of the biggest pieces of advice is just add more curl to your petals. It'll make it look more realistic rather than flat, flat looking petals, and that'll add to a more misshapen rose. So adding that curl does make a huge difference. So one thing with my medium rose tutorial, the way that I start the rose is I like to just take one petal and start it using that one petal, and then gluing it from then on. And then in my large rose tutorial, I mentioned that you can just bring two together and then have one petal outwards and one petal inwards, folding into the other petal to start the center. And one thing I've noticed with that method is that if you just simply glue it like this, you'll have a more squat looking center. It's more boxy. And so if you're using it, if you're starting your rose this way, like that, I would recommend that you sort of press on the sides of your petals so that you get a taller sort of rosebud. So let me see if I can do that without having it glued first. So like this, it's more squat. It sits lower to sort of the ground in that sense, and the reason why that makes a difference is when you start gluing your medium petals, your center might be a little bit too short for your medium petals. And so one way to fix that is just to squeeze the sides of the petals as you're doing that so that it sits up more. Right, so just give it a quick squeeze. So what I'll do first is I will add a little bit of glue to one side, and then I'm going to press up to make sure that I have a taller center, or more upright sitting center. Then I'll add glue to the other side and make sure I pinch up. So with that, I've started the rosebud and it doesn't sit so squat. I'll show the comparison. So with what I did, I pinched it up a little bit higher so it sits higher. But if I didn't do that, it sits a lot more squat. And there's a difference of about, I would say, ½ an inch from this and this. And so that's why it does make sort of a difference. But from here, it's quite easy. And here you can add glue to this side, or one side of the petals. And then you can just simply bring this one towards the center, and then bring the one with the glue that was added to meet with it, sort of like a hug. And then you've got one piece of your rosebud. I'm going to glue this piece to this one and just continue on with what I was doing before. So I glue to one petal, and then I'll bring the petals together, the one without the glue first, to meet with the one with the glue, and sort of like a hug, and glue it down. So I can do that once more. Bring this forward or towards the center, and then that one meets it, sort of like an embrace. So that starts the rose with the rosebud, and you've got a nice looking center there. So what I want to do differently in this video is that in my previous videos, I glued the petals together, but I offset it. So I'm going to do it with this rose, I'm going to do it where it's not offset, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So how you want to glue your medium petal, now that you've got your rosebud, is you want I'll say the side flaps pointing down, and then you glue it to the rose bud. And I leave a little small space in between. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to. I typically do. It's about a little less than 1/4 inch. But then when you flip it over, you have the two petals on the side and the flaps are facing down. Right, so if you accidentally glue it incorrectly, you can always curl it the other way, or you can rip it out and redo it. But the petals face down in this way. And then in order to start the rose, what I do is add glue to the sides here, closest to the rosebud. And then I take my finger, my index finger on top, and my middle finger and my thumb underneath. And then I use my index finger to press down while the thumb and the middle finger are at the two sides where I put glue. And I just bring it forward and press and hold on the sides. So my camera cut out, and I'm not sure what I got before it cut out, but I added 2 petals already. And so I'm going to add the other 2 for this layer. And again, there's just glue on the bottom sides, closest to the rosebud. Take my index finger and thumb and middle finger underneath, press it down while the thumb and the middle finger are holding the petal on the sides so that it's glued sort of in one swift motion. I'll do the last one for this layer. And this is the first layer of the rose. So I had 12 petals in total, so this is the first layer of 4, and so I have 2 more layers after that. And what I've done in my previous videos is that I have sort of shifted or offset the petals, the placement of the petals by 45 degrees, and glue them in the diagonals. But in this video, I'm going to show you what it looks like when I don't do that. The effect is still really pretty. You still have a really nice rose. As I said in my medium video, it just looks a little more uniform, but there's nothing wrong with gluing it in the same place as you had before. So again, I'm not offsetting it, I'm just gluing it as it was in the first layer. And when I glue my second petals, it would be like this again. So this layer was, these petals were glued here before. So again, I'm not offsetting it, and I want to show you what it looks like when you don't. Sometimes it can be a little difficult when you are new to making these flowers and you're offsetting the petals and the placement looks a little bit off. And so if you're having trouble, just go with this method. You still have a very beautiful paper rose at the end of it. And one thing also is that I always recommend, if you're new to making flowers, I always recommend going with a smaller size to practice. So the small rose is actually a very good size to practice with. Your petals are not too big. So, you know, they're nice and small enough that you can handle them very easily. With the large rose, it can get really hard to hold all the petals and get the correct placement, especially if you're learning how to make this rose. So small size is really good to start with. Also, you can smooth out little bumps that you might have from gluing. And there's one last petal in this layer. Oops. Alright, so 4 more petals left for this last layer. I'm going to glue the petals onto the bottom. And again, I'm not offsetting it, so the placement of the petals is quite easy since you just follow what you had done before. If you're having trouble with the placement of your petals and they look too flat, one thing I do is when I have my thumb and my index, or my thumb and my index finger, or my middle finger, is when I'm holding it, I also sort of pinch it together so that it creates a sort of crease here. I mean, it gives it a little bit more of a realistic look. That's one thing you can do. Whoops. Just to demonstrate without that. You don't have to, but sometimes it's the difference between just a flat looking rose like that, I mean a flat looking rose petal, or just having that sort of curve there when I pinch it together. I think it makes more sense when if you're following along and making this rose to see what I mean. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that correctly, but what I do is I pinch it together. This petal goes, the sides go outwards, and then it creates this sort of curvature right there. And it gives the rose a more realistic look, I think, anyway. And so 2 more petals. And these are the last ones with the medium size. Oops, I keep dropping this rose. So glue on the sides. And then also what I'm doing is when I'm pinching it, I'm making it come outwards more, and also it sort of has more of a relaxed look to it. And you can see the petals in here in the center are sitting upright, but the ones on the outside are sitting sort of as if it was leaning back a little bit. That helps the overall look as well. Alright, and so this is my last petal for the medium size petals in this rose. And generally, I actually like to keep it at this size. I think it makes a really nice and tight rose, and I generally, for the small rose template, do not add any of the large petals to it. I like the way it looks here, but there's always the option. It depends on how big you want your rose, but I have a ruler here. So without the large petals, this rose is about 5 to 6 inches. It depends on how you measure it. If you're looking for a larger rose, you can obviously add this larger layer. So this is how I like to keep it. If you like it like this as well, you can stop here. But I'll show you how I add the last 6 large petals. And if you've watched my other videos, this is just a similar way of doing it as I did before. I just take one petal and I start off anywhere that I want and glue that all around. I just make sure to overlap the second petal, or the one you're working on, a little bit with the previous petal that you had placed. Essentially, you glue it around in a circle to create a wider rose. And you can play around with the way the rose looks. You can add less of the medium petals and more of the large petals if you like. There's no one set way of doing it, and I try to avoid being too descriptive in how the rose needs to be made. But this is one example. So that's 3 petals. I have 3 more. You can see that adding the large petal just adds to the overall width of the rose. So it's something to keep in mind if you're making roses a specific diameter. All right, and one last petal here. And so this is my small rose template. You can see that adding the outer layer of the large petals made it wider. Let's see. It's now about 7.5. I've made it sometimes where it's 8 inches. So depending on where you're measuring, it's about 7 or 8 inches. If you're placing the petals tighter, of course it's smaller, but I like to keep just the medium petals, but you can make it however you like.